Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Saturday. I hope you guys had a wonderful 4th of July holiday yesterday. For today's video, I finished up a little table project that I was working on. I think it turned out really cute. I hope you guys like it too. And without further ado, let's get to today's project. My project for today is this little wooden table that I picked up at a yard sale a while ago for $10. Now, I knew I was going to have to sand the top of it. The finish was in terrible shape and it literally looked like it was flaking off in places. And since this is a relatively cheaply made table, the veneer on the top was very, very thin, and I did end up sanding through it in a couple of spots, but I knew I was going to be painting over it anyway, so I wasn't really worried about it. Once I was finished with the sanding, I needed to tighten up all of the legs. They were pretty wobbly. So I grabbed my little wrench set and went around and tightened up the bolts on each one. And then I also went around with my screw gun and made sure that all of the screws that were keeping everything together were nice and tight as well. Once I had made my little table nice and sturdy, I took it back inside and cleaned it back up again. I'm just going over it with some crud cutter and spraying it down really well and then wiping that off with some dry shop towels. And once I am done with that step, I'm going to rinse it off with some clean water just to remove any of that crud cutter residue. Before I added paint to my little table, I wanted to address the issues on the top. I realized as I was sanding it that it was actually a pressboard top with a very thin veneer over it. And as I stated earlier, I'd actually sanded through that veneer in one spot. And along the edges, there were also some chips and places where the veneer or where the pressboard was kind of showing. So I took my can of spray shellac and I sealed up around all the edges and where I had sanded through and let that dry before I began painting, just so that I didn't run the risk of any of that pressboard swelling when I added my paint. Then it was finally on to my paint, and for this piece I'm going with Sweet Pickins Milk Paint, and this is one of the new bespoke colors called Hollandaise. I went back and forth over a scheme for this little table, but I really wanted something that looked kind of summery, but that would also transition into fall. And for me, yellow is a good color for that. So that was basically why I chose this color. I did add Extra Bond to my paint, and you can see here what an absolute difference the second coat makes as opposed to the first. I did end up putting 3 good coats of the milk paint on this piece. Now, even though I was careful as I painted the base of this table, I still did get a little lip of paint around the edge, and I wanted that nice and smooth. So I just sanded it very carefully and then wiped it back down again before I started painting the top. Now, you probably noticed that I did not paint the top of this table yellow, and the reason for that is that I'm going to be putting some decoupage paper over the top. And to start that process, I like to have a nice white crisp base underneath my paper so that my images really stand out well. The white paint I'm using is the DIY Cottage color called White Linen, and the reason I like to use the Cottage color under my decoupage paper is that it has a built-in sealer, so I don't have to worry about my decoupage medium reactivating my paint and accidentally having it bleed up into my paper. Once my paint was completely dry, I took my little table outside to do some sanding and make sure everything was nice and smooth, and also do a little bit of distressing. I'm just using my palm sander on its very lowest setting with some 220 grit sandpaper and going over all of the smooth surfaces, and then also doing a little bit of distressing around the edges and in those little details on the legs to bring back some of that gorgeous dark wood tone from underneath the paint. I also went over the top just to make sure everything was nice and smooth before I took my table back inside, got it cleaned and ready for decoupage paper. The paper I'm going to be using is called Sepia Blossom. It's by Roycycled Treasures, and it is a gorgeous paper that has a big, beautiful flower on it that is a really good match for this Hollandaise color of yellow. Since I wanted the big flower to be the focal point of the top of this table, I made sure to line it up as close as I could to the corners of my table. Then I cut off some of the excess paper and spritzed my paper with just a little bit of water to relax the fibers. And then I lined it back up again on the top of my table. Once I had my paper smoothed back out over the top, I began the decoupaging process by folding the first piece of my paper back and then applying my decoupage medium. For my medium, I'm using DIY's clear liquid patina. I'm just putting a nice, smooth, even coat of that down in a strip along the front side of this table. And then I am laying my paper very carefully back down over that section of patina. Now, I'm not going to lie and tell you that this was a super easy process. It took me a couple minutes to get that paper smoothed back out exactly where I wanted it. The beautiful thing, though, about Roycycled's paper is that it is repositionable. It is a really strong paper, and as long as you're careful, you can move it around if you need to straighten it back out. Once I had it back in place, I went ahead and used my hands very carefully to smooth it back out over my liquid patina. And once I had that done, I went ahead and grabbed my brush and added a coat of the liquid patina over the top of my paper. Once I had that first strip of decoupage paper down really well, I moved on to making my way down the rest of the table. So I'm just adding another little strip of the decoupage medium to the top of the table, and then I'm using my brush to smooth that paper towards me. I start in the middle and then work my way out to the sides, pushing out any wrinkles as I go and just working in small sections and just picking that paper back up and repositioning it if I need to, and then going and applying another small section of that medium and just keep on working my way towards myself to cover the entire top of the table. Once I was finished applying my decoupage paper and I had a nice even coat of that clear patina over the top of it, I went ahead and set it aside to dry overnight. Once it was nice and dry, I grabbed a piece of 220 grit sandpaper and just went around the edges very carefully, removing that excess decoupage paper. I'm just doing that in a downward sweeping motion, just kind of hitting the edge of the table to sand away that excess. Once I finish with this step, one thing that I like to do is go around the edge of my piece and just make sure that none of the paper has lifted at all. And if it has, I secure it back down with a little artist brush and a touch more liquid patina. You can see here, I just use my thumb and go around the entire edge and just kind of rough the paper a little bit to see if there are any spots that are lifting. And again, if there are, I just add in a touch more of that liquid patina just to make sure I have nice tight edges and that everything is laid down and well adhered. Once I'd completed this process and my liquid patina was nice and dry, it was time to seal my little table. Now, like DIY paint, Sweet Pickins Milk Paint also needs to be sealed. And my go-to is normally their oil wax. However, in this case, I wanted to do some highlighting or low lighting, whatever you'd like to call it, with some black wax when I was finished. So I decided instead to go in with DIY's clear wax as my basically base coat. So I'm using my soft bristled brush and I'm going over the entire painted part of this table with a nice even coat of that clear wax and then just wiping back the excess with a dry shop towel. I also did go ahead and go over the top of the table with the clear wax as well. I know it was already sealed with the liquid patina, but I love the feel and the finish of wax. And I knew I wanted to put a little bit of black wax around the edges for shading. So I thought it might be a good idea to add some of that clear wax on top as well. Then it was on to my black wax, and I did not want to completely have this black wax take over the color of the table. So I am mixing it about 2/3 to a third. So about 2/3 mineral spirits to a third wax, and using that as basically a glaze over the main parts of this little table. So you can see here it's very liquidy. It doesn't really soak in too much into the table, and it just basically gives a little bit of patina. I did go a little heavier in those grooves around the tops of the legs just to add in more shadowing, and then I did go along the underside of the tabletop and a little bit around the tops of the legs as well, just to add a little more shadowing in those areas. Once I was finished with the base of the table and I was happy with how my black wax was looking, I went ahead and added a touch to the top of the table as well, just adding it as kind of a frame around the edges and in the corners. So I added a little bit more in each corner and then just kind of feathered it out towards the edge of the table in all four corners. Once I was finished with this process, my little table was complete, and I am very, very happy with how it came together. I think it's a perfect accent, not only to finish out summer, but to move me right into my fall decorating as well. And I really hope you guys like it too. today, you guys. I hope you liked my little side table project, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. What did you think of that beautiful paper? I love it. It's one of my favorites by Roycycled. I do actually carry it here in the shop as well as online at my website. And it's, to me, the colors speak, like I said in the video, both to summer and to fall. So that will be a perfect little transition piece as I start the process of decorating for fall. Yes, I can hardly believe it's that time already, you guys, crazy. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then of course, don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of today's project. Just a quick reminder too, any of the paint and products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I carry DIY paint and products as well as Sweet Pickins Milk Paint and products. Just a quick note on Sweet Pickins, the color of the month for July is Kent. That is 35% off through July 31st, available on my website as well as here in the shop at that price. So if you're in need of a beautiful blue, check that out. And I also carry Roycycled Treasures Decoupage Papers, and I do have some of that beautiful Sepia Blooms paper in stock as well, along with Redesign with Prima. So if you're in need of any DIY products, make sure to check those out at my website. And again, that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. Now for Wednesday's video. I am really not positive at this moment what that's going to look like. My husband and I are not planning on doing a junk run again tomorrow. We have projects that we're working on at home. I have started the process of digging up a bunch of my yard so that I can put in gardens, and my husband's been working on putting in gutters on the front of the house and just a whole bunch of things. So a junk run just really isn't in the cards, and that means that I basically have Tuesday to try and whip out a project or two and then edit all the video for Wednesday. So we will see what I come up with for Wednesday. It might not be anything grand, but I will try to have something for you. So I hope you'll join me back here on Wednesday for that. Until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your holiday weekend. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it, and I will see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.